4-point hesitation roll, showing us the very crisp handling of the extra, as Melanie then pulls a series of knife-edge tumbles at the top. Turns of that, figure inverted again, and once again pushing up, remaining inverted. Ouch, that looks very uncomfortable indeed. A flick roll at the apex. A 4-point hesitation roll, an upward 45-degree line, followed by a tumble, and now that excellent power to weight ratio comes into its own as Melanie brings the extra 330 into effectively a hover, very nose high. Isn't it easy to see why she's won all of these titles at competition level, but also gained such a reputation on the international aerobatic display circuit as well. A lot of use of negative G in this display, as in this descending outside turn. After that kind of display, it does sometimes take a little bit of time and a little bit of organising, so it's great that Melanie is going to be available for a chat, a signing, a photo or two. Yeah, 4 o'clock, the time for that, and if you're not sure where that is, come to the information point in front of us here, adjacent to the control tower, the yellow and white striped marquee. But please do, as she taxis by, give it up for Melanie Aspels with the extra EA 330. So now if you look to your left-hand side, this is the T-6 Texan. In the UK, we knew the aircraft as the Harvard. This aircraft just getting airborne now will be the next display item. First thing to mention is that very distinctive engine sound. This is a radial engine. The cylinders are arranged in a circular fashion around the crankshaft, and it does create, at certain times in the flight, that very nice growl. Rated at 600 horsepower. And that was the secret of success, because by 1945, over 17,000 had been built. Not just by North American, the original manufacturer, but by companies like Canadian Car Foundry, and another Canadian manufacturer, Nordyne. And this is a Harvard 2B model, which is today operated by Hurricane Heritage and the West London Aero Club at White Waltham in Berkshire. And this aircraft only really typifies what I was saying about how useful a Harvard still is, and one reason why there are so many of them around, because this dates from 1942, this aircraft. It's one of the older Harvards still around in airworthy condition. Built in Montreal, it served in Ontario as part of the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, which I think we'll probably come back to in talking about this aircraft. Then with the Swedish Air Force, for a long time it was a ground instructional airframe. It was returned to flight in Sweden. Then in 2016, it was bought by a chap called James Brown, aimed his training on the Battle of Britain veteran Mark I Hurricane that he'd just bought. He set up an organisation called Hurricane Heritage to operate it. His dream, although he said, no, if I'm not good enough to be able to do it, I won't mind, was to get to fly the Hurricane. He was a private pilot, but he didn't have tail dragger experience. He gradually went this aircraft was an important, vitally important part. And guess what? He's now displaying the Hurricane, flying it a great deal, flying it so much of that down to this aeroplane.
Yeah, that's a great story. And as you mentioned, it does today what it did during the 30s and 40s, bridging that gap between the elementary fighters of the day, mainly the Tiger Moth back then, and the frontline fighters, the Spitfires, the Hurricanes, the Mustangs. In today's terminology in the Royal Air Force, this is a hawk. It fills that gap. It's the one that takes you from learning basic airmanship to transitioning you onto the frontline fighters.
And why did they do all that so well? Well, it was such an excellent advanced trainer for all sorts of reasons. Pretty powerful, that 600 horsepower engine. Some of its handling characteristics similar to crucially, as we were saying about the Chipmunk, it could bite if the student wasn't careful. Not an aircraft to get low and slow in, according to one Warbird pilot I spoke to. And there's the ground handling aspect of handling a powerful tail dragger. It needs to be flown accurately in terms of your speed in the circuit, and your footwork once you're on the ground on the rudder pedals has to be pretty dexterous to stop it ground looping.
And worth remembering, back in the late 1930s and early 40s, Spitfires, Hurricanes and Mustangs were all single-seaters. Today we have two-seaters. Back then they were all single-seaters. So at some time you had to strap yourself into a Spitfire on your own, get it airborne, fly it around the circuit and land it again with no help whatsoever. So this aircraft tried to, being an instructional aircraft, a two-seater, was just trying to give you that feel of what this is going to be like. But when you read some of the classic books, Geoffrey Whelan especially, his description of flying the Harvard and then getting into a Spitfire for the first time is absolutely magical.
Warbird stage. Of course, James Brown, the owner of this aircraft, or the part of this aircraft now, is a case in point. He didn't fly a two-seat Hurricane. Yeah, this is the classic progression. The other thing was it could be armed with guns, practice bombs, rockets for armament training, so it was very versatile as a trainer, used in huge numbers by the Empire and later the British Commonwealth air training plans. The idea of those being that training would move out of the UK to places where it could be less easily disrupted by enemy action. Enormous program. In Canada alone, more than 50,000 pilots passed through that plans and facilities. And it wasn't just pilots, it was all members of all sorts of multi-crew aircraft crews. 167,000 odd aircrew passed through the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan.
It's so often the way that advanced trainers are forced into a light combat role. It happens very often. As you said, very much combat. We used them in Kenya against the Mau Mau in the 1950s, France in the Algerian War, Portugal as well during the Portuguese colonial war. Could be armed with machine guns and also some fairly small sort of 20-25 pound bombs.
Yep, and they were used as forward air controllers in the Korean War, the role we were talking about to some extent with the Bird Dog earlier on by the US Air Force between 1950 and 53.
Also quite often used in different disguises in film roles, of course. I'm thinking of Tora as the Zero,
Yes.
and also as a sort of non-specific ground attack aircraft in a bridge too far quite early on when Horrocks's 30 Corps get bogged down in the early part of the ground war where they call up the ground attack aircraft with purple smoke. They are definitely Harvards.
Yes, so there are several Harvards on strength of the Royal Netherlands Air Force historic flight whose Spitfire and Beach we saw earlier, and several of those, I think, nearly 15,500 of these aeroplanes in all variants were built. And it wasn't just with the British Armed Forces that they served for a very long time. The South African Air Force brought its first Harvards into service in 1940. It retired the last in 1995. And they had 55 still on service for a farewell flight pass to mark 55 retirement. And that was far longer than we used them for as trainers for sort of everyday Air Force use. The final wings course, the course on which RAF pilots get their wings to pass out on the Harvard, did so as far back as 1955, but they soldiered on, as I said, at Boscombe Down, supporting test work. Also used by the Royal Navy Historic Flight for a little while as an advanced tail dragger trainer.
Aircraft is a very different experience. There's so many different forces that are at play. We keep talking about and kept on strength to teach people how to fly tail draggers because they are quite rare today, and it's a very difficult skill.
Typified by this aeroplane coming in for its final pass before departing, the Nordai Harvard 2B. Heading back to its base at White Waltham in Berkshire in the hands of Mike Collett. And Mike's someone else who's built up to flying heavy metal warbirds like the Hurricane and Spitfire, both of which he flies regularly via the Harvard. And this one is available